Hello and good morning to everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Matt. I'm one of the senior strategy facilitators at Alembic. My background is in healthcare, although today I help leaders across all sectors work through their most challenging problems. And that's anything from high-level conflict to working towards selling your business and all of the things that fall in between. We like to do that with a mix of facilitation, of coaching, of training, and whatever else we can put together to help out. And before we get started on our topic today, we should do some introductions to the rest of the Alembic team that are joining me today. We're very lucky to have a full complement of us with you today. So perhaps, Barbara, you can start us off with an intro.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Interesting topic today. And I'm a senior strategy facilitator and a coach at Alembic. And my background is management consulting and change management. And what I do is I help leaders and their teams in the transition, because the problem normally is where things get started and have to start. And so through coaching and facilitation, we support the team to get to where they want to be and get to the outcome that they're really looking forward to achieve.
Wanda, perhaps you can give us an intro as well.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much, Matt. What a delight to be with you all this morning. I'm a leadership coach and strategy advisor with Alembic, and my background is in organizational psychology, and absolutely delighted to be here and share some thoughts around this super hot topic at the moment.
And finally, a returning face, Nick.
Morning, everybody. Very nice to see you on the webinar this morning. So I'm Nick Mayhew, MD and founder at Alembic, and just look forward to today's session.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. If you want to next slide. Okay, let's introduce today's topic. So that's AI and its role in business and transformation. Everybody's probably heard of AI, but when you ask people to tell you about it, you get a range of different responses. So I'm going to start just with a simple definition of what AI is. In really simple terms, it's the capability of a computer to demonstrate human-like behavior. But some examples of that are really obvious. So anybody that's used a general language model like ChatGPT, it's really obviously think of as modern AI. And other examples can be a bit less obvious. So if you think about the uncanny recommendation you get from Netflix for a show you might like, also AI. In fact, AI is really everywhere these days. For me, it raised two interesting questions as we were talking about it, which we'll try to explore a little bit more as we run through the topic today. Those questions are you using AI in your business? And if you're not using AI in your business, why are you not using AI in your business? Now, something which helped us at Alembic when we were talking through this subject was looking at the diffusion of innovation curve that you can see on here. Most of you, I think, are probably going to be familiar with it. Essentially describes the number of users that are adopting new technologies or ideas over time, which you can see on the curve. From a small amount at the start on innovators, moving through the model to laggards at the end who are quite late to adopt and pick up new technologies. Perhaps for you as well, it'd be interesting to think about where you might sit on that curve as we start to talk through things today. And actually our discussion on technology adoption, it kind of took us in a direction of thinking about other really transformational and significant adoptions that we've seen in our lifetime for a bit of context. An example that really stuck with us was an example of the internet. So this was a new and novel technology at the time. People didn't really pick it up super quickly. People didn't really know what to do with it when it first came out. And I think that AI shares a few of those characteristics with the internet. And it suffers from some of the same barriers to adoption as well. And with that example in mind, and considering the world-changing impact the internet had on business and really on the world in general, I want to try and explore why AI technology hasn't got more uptake for your average business person, particularly if you think how much exposure there is. Everybody's aware of AI and what a big deal it is. Which brings me onto our poll, which I think Alice will help us launch. So please take a minute and try and have a think about what your biggest barrier to using AI is. This is whether you use it a little bit or whether it's something that's completely new to you. Okay, so the biggest barrier coming in from those votes is not being tech savvy, closely followed by time and the unknown. Those were certainly things that we talked about when we were first looking at our barriers and putting our theories about what we suspected would be big barriers for other people. Okay, great. We'll circle back round and we'll talk about that some more at the end. So I thought a good place to start talking about how we might use AI in business is to tell you a little bit about our experiences with AI. And you can see they're dotted all over the slide. Now, our regular strategy cafe, where we generally come from a place of providing some expert advice, is changed a little today. Today's objective is really to generate some discussion, to tell you a little bit about our experiences, really as novice AI users. I suspect it could be something which hits more relatably to our audience, who I suspect are probably mostly novice AI users. Apologies if I'm offending any expert users we have on our listeners today. As you can see between us, we've actually used AI for quite a few different things. And before starting to prepare for the webinar, I'll let my colleagues talk a little bit more to these later on. I can see a couple of mine are dotted in there. My favorite was probably my challenging a parking fine. I know it's not in a business context, but GPT-4 wrote me a wonderfully worded legal challenge to my penalty notice based on required grace periods for car parks in Scotland, which I thought was really, really impressive. It was promptly rejected, but there you go. It was still fun to do. However, on top of these things, you can see dotted around on screen, we've also really challenged ourselves to dig deeper into using AI and to pick up AI technology that's completely new to us. So everybody has done a little bit of that. And I'm going to pick up the baton first and tell you a little bit about my experiences with AI. Well, first of all, in the context of me, I think it's probably worth mentioning that I'm a bit of a geek and tech enthusiast. And I've used AI programs since some of them were made public in their betas, such as DALL-E and GPT. So as you can imagine, working on this AI project was right down my street. And I found it really fascinating. And it continues to blow me away, just how powerful and extensive the applications for some of this software are. I've definitely started to use it a little bit more often, particularly now that I've formed more of a habit around using it in my day-to-day. And probably unsurprisingly, it has made my life easier. I think a really good example is to use this webinar. So during this webinar, all of the images that are part of this deck are generated using Midjourney, which is an AI image generating tool which you can use to generate pretty much any visuals you like using prompts. So for example, 2 espresso coffee cups sitting on a table with a few coffee beans scattered around, taken from above in a photorealistic style. If you're someone that is looking at our slides, you'll be able to see the outcome of that photo on the far right. And that's also the photo that I used to replace our regular picture on our welcome page. I've also included some other images that I generated, partially for anyone that's interested and partially because I think they're great. The middle left, you can see a reimagining of the Alembic logo. This is also generated by Midjourney. I just told Midjourney a little bit about our company and it came up with that. I think it's really excellent. And I think this one has obvious business applications, similar with the one in the middle right. So this is, might be harder to see the immediate applications. This is a poster advertising off-roading holidays on Mars. Good applications, perhaps not that prompt specifically, but you can get the idea of how powerful that could be for a marketing department, for example. While image generation is a really simple example of AI, it made looking for the right visuals for this deck a lot quicker and easier. And it's something I think could have really significant application for me. Given that I use slide decks all the time, and given that, in the context of our business having to find resource for that, you might not have to pay for a stock photo. I think all of those photos are in the range of as good as you might find on a stock website. There's also another element of AI to this presentation, and that is that there's a full section which I've already presented and read out to you, which was completely written by AI. And I would be absolutely fascinated to know if anybody has picked out which section that is. I think even my colleagues don't know which part it is. They know it's in there. And while I put that in there for the significant novelty factor of doing so and presenting it at a webinar about AI, it also brought a number of questions to my mind. One of those questions, the first that came to my mind was, if I already know about AI, I find it really interesting, and I use it in my personal life semi-regularly, why am I not bringing it to work? I know I could speed up what I'm doing. I could probably improve some elements of what I do with better AI integration, but I'm not. So what's going on there? It's a difficult question for me, but I think there's a few things from doing a bit of reflection on why that might be. The first is, the more I use AI, the more I learn that I'm completely inept at using AI. Not only is it barriers to entry when you're picking up a new program, but there's also the prompt generation side, which is how you get your output, for example, in the form of the art that you see on screen. I think this is something which is new, and it's really an art form. And I've found that I am no artist, unfortunately, and I think it's this amateur nature which really makes me hesitate to introduce AI at work. The second reason I think is more around just habit formation. I just haven't formed a habit of reaching for AI when I'm performing tasks at work, and I know I can improve that by just doing it more, like any tool that you learn. And that's if I wanted to do that. And the final thing really spins out from that thought, and that is, do I want to? I think sometimes I feel guilty about using it and presenting something which doesn't feel genuinely like my work, which might be silly because maybe it's not really so different from previous generation search engines, for example. But there's a feeling that I can't shake, that it's not genuinely me. I would be really interested to hear from the audience about that. So if somebody presented you work as their own in your business and you found out it was produced by AI, how would you feel about that? Perhaps get in the chat and tell us a little bit about that. I'm going to extend a similar question to my colleagues, as it's a position that I found myself in at Alembic. So for my colleagues at Alembic, if you were congratulated on work well done, which you produced using AI, would you feel compelled to tell somebody that it was produced using AI? Or would you say, thank you very much, and take the praise for yourself? I'll put that to whoever wants to come in to answer it. Nick?
Yeah, I probably would cite it. Like I wouldn't, and we were talking about this, I wouldn't claim that I'd flown to a new city to do some work on my own initiative. I'd, tell everyone I'd taken a flight, and I think this has just become normal. So I probably would cite it.
What about Barbara and Wanda? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, Matt, I think until we reach that kind of tipping point culturally and society, as a whole society, where we don't go mention to everybody all the time that we've used the internet, for example, to do something, right? Until we reach that kind of tipping point, I think I sit with the same kind of sentiment as you. I feel like I would want to say, I used ChatGPT for this, or I had the help of Midjourney, or I'd like to make a mention of it, I think.
What about you, Barbara?
Similar thing. I've definitely disclosed upfront. I've done this with ChatGPT, especially the first few times, because the need of making sure that everyone knew that I got help, but also I think there's also an element of responsibility in terms of if you find something that is not 100% correct or doesn't resonate, it's not me. I think there's also that aspect. But I'm getting more and more comfortable with it now.
It is really interesting that we have unanimous feelings in that space. And while I feel that way, I also feel like I shouldn't feel that way. As Wanda was speaking to us, it gets more normal. And I resonate with the example about search engines, that you wouldn't now feel the need to say, oh, I found that information on Google. You would present it as your work. So I think eventually it should move in that direction. Nevertheless, I completely agree with you and can't shake that feeling. And on to you, Wanda, to pick up the thread.
Thanks so much. So this beautiful image, as Matt mentioned, is also generated through Midjourney. And it really is a kind of a sense for me of how I'm feeling a little bit with my journey personally around AI and adopting AI. And that is that sometimes I feel a little like I can't see the wood for the trees. So I sometimes I'm not sure what the best tools are to use, and I need to go and do some research on that. And I'd love to use it more because I recognize that there's wonderful benefits and capabilities that perhaps I'm just not leaning into yet. So I am personally not really an early adopter at all. But then when I talk to some colleagues or other business people, they may not have touched it or have touched it once or twice. So I think it's all relative, what is really an early adopter, what isn't really an early adopter. And so for me, I have this deep sense that I want to feel really comfortable around something and adept at something. But we all know that that's not the way that we really learn. In order to get comfortable using something, we have to really use it. So what I've been using it for mostly is using ChatGPT 3 and now ChatGPT 4. For me, it's a wonderful way of eliminating kind of blank page syndrome, where you hit a blank page and you're just not sure where to start. So it does provide that kind of kickoff for me, which is really, I find really helpful. I've also used it quite a lot to challenge my own thinking. So I love to kind of find out what's out there that's maybe opposite to what I'm thinking or how I'm presenting something. And I found that really useful as well. It's really fulfilling to have this idea of kind of we're crafting something from scratch. But the reality is that it's just another crafting tool. I don't yet feel comfortable around the fact that it's just another crafting tool, perhaps. But certainly I am getting more and more comfortable as it becomes more and more of a habit to use AI and things like ChatGPT, Midjourney, more and more. I've also been using a wonderful tool called AnyWord, and AnyWord really helps you to track. It generates language, and then it helps you to track the efficiency and efficacy of the words and content relative to very specific audiences and platforms. So you'll type in your prompt, and then it'll bring up some content for you. And you'll say, I want to put this in content that is best for for LinkedIn as a platform and for this particular audience. And it'll rejig all of that for you and come up with suggestions. So AnyWord is something that I've been using quite a bit, and I've really loved that and found it super helpful. Definitely have loved playing around with Midjourney. using it kind of in a little bit of a researchy way, thinking about it as a medium, and is it really a medium or is it just a tool? So could it be used in the same way as a paintbrush and paint could be used, and would it have that same kind of feeling of fulfillment, of generating the same kind of emotional response for me as working with actual paint and a brush would? And so kind of been tracking my emotional responses to that, and it's been really super interesting along that journey to see where I land up. So really those are the most of the tools that I've been using, and that's been kind of ChatGPT, AnyWord, a bit of Midjourney, and just playing around like with things that have got AI integrated into them. So Calendly has got a beautiful new AI integration, which describes the type of meeting that you're having and then provide suggestions around that for you. So that's been my journey really with it so far. Thanks, Matt.
That's quite right. I really resonate with the way that you described using Midjourney as well. I think it's great for art. I love art and have no skill in producing it myself. So find it extremely satisfying to use for that purpose as well. Barbara, maybe you give us a bit of your experience with using AI over the past few weeks.
Yeah. Unlike you, I'm not an early adopter. In fact, I'm of the opposite scale of the curve. I'm a laggard to the point that I still have to write with pen and paper most of the time. But this time, my experience with trying new technology, and particularly AI, has been very, very different, particularly because I found some of the tools that I've been using, ChatGPT and DALL-E particularly, very easy and intuitive. And the fact that I could try and use it more in a playful way, and there were not loads of instructions, is very immediate. You just start typing and something comes up, and then you play with the results. Enable me to lower a little bit my barrier to the resistance to change that I usually have, due to the fear of not being a tech savvy, and also with the idea that, gosh, I need to spend a load of time to learn these things, which speaks to the poll that we did at the very beginning. And therefore, I think I've been using AI just put me in a very different mindset and a mind frame this time, very playful. And particularly, I used DALL-E, which is similar to Midjourney, is a tool that generates images by using prompts. And what it helped me do is to generate, it's a generative process that happens through it, whereby I use it specifically for coaching. We use loads of images in coaching as a way of exploring the unconscious and things that are not necessarily verbalized. So using images can be a very useful way to access different types of information. And I had a particular image in mind that I could not translate, and I could not find in any magazine. I tried to find many different magazines, but there was not the image that I had in my mind. And so I used DALL-E to do that. And it's very easy, because not only you can type what you have in mind and you have an immediate response. In a couple of seconds, you have an image. Then you can refine and refine and refine. And that immediate feedback loop helped me refine what I had in my mind. So as you see in the image that you have here in the slides, that's the process that DALL-E helped me go through. The image in my mind that gets crystallize more and more and more by just providing more input to the system. And I think it's beautiful, and it's easy. On top of that, the DALL-E provides a lot of tips every time a new image gets generated, with just telling you you can use a different style, or you can use, for example, picture style, or this type of art, or and this is what it would look like. So it's very intuitive and very easy. I cannot necessarily say the same for Microsoft Copilot. And in all honesty, it's been a very early experience. I haven't been fully using it yet. I just had some I did some research and so a few ways of using it. And that experience for me is already a bit different. It's less playful and it's less intuitive, and it feels more like work in a way, partially because it's a tool that integrates, and it's part of Microsoft, and it's made to be, it's an assistant. It's an efficiency tool that integrates with all of the Microsoft applications and can do loads of very beautiful things. Like generating, for example, entire new documents in PowerPoint by taking many different bits and pieces from other documents that you give input to use, as well as pictures and drafts. And in Teams, you can use to set agendas for meeting and summarize bullet points from OneNote. To support in generating new discussions, and particularly with Excel, seems to be incredibly useful in summarizing loads of data, doing graphs and showing you and telling you how the tool came to those specific conclusions. But the intuitiveness that comes from DALL-E or ChatGPT, from that perspective, has been taken away from me. Even in trying to understand how to get it, how to buy it, how to download it, it's more complicated. But overall, I think what I'm going to be doing is trying to use it with the application in Microsoft that I feel more familiar with, so that it's easier to start, to remove my barrier to the resistance that I have. And I think by starting it in this way, then it's going to be easier to approach it. And I definitely want to continue to have the playfulness mind frame rather than the work. And oh gosh, I need to spend a lot of time before I get to somewhere with this, which always is at the back of my mind.
That's such a lovely comment. I hadn't considered that, but I really, really agree with that sentiment. And I had a similar experience with Copilot and not really picked up using it. But I'm well aware that our entire ecosystem is within Microsoft 365. So if there is ever going to be an application for us to make some impact with what we do, it is probably going to be Copilot. So it's a definite flag for Alembic to start learning a bit more about Copilot on the back of doing this research. Nick, what have you been using? Have you been using similar things? Any different thoughts from what we've been over?
Well, so I mean, I instantly feel a kind of sense of discomfort at having to do more with Microsoft. So just I'm stating my football team allegiance there up front. But yeah, so I kind of come across this from a different direction. I've been using it, for about a year now, in all sorts of different domains. Matt helped me generate this image, which kind of feeds into kind of my comments. So this is me as a student, really struggling to get the right kind of valuable interaction that I needed as a mature student in my science degree, which I've just finished, and finding that going to ChatGPT was an amazing solution. So for me, it was this ability to talk to somebody about something new while I'm thinking, reflecting, learning, researching, studying, and I've got an objective to sort of write or produce something. Not wanting to use AI for the actual content, because that'd be plagiarism, and it'd be a breach of kind of policies, but just needing somebody in, the time where I'm actually studying to talk to, who can competently reflect. And you'd think that would be a fellow student who's on the same course who I get on with. That would be what would have happened in the 1980s when I was at uni. Maybe a teaching fellow, but they're hard to track down, got to get an appointment. When the thought is in your mind, they're not available. Maybe you can speak to them a week on Wednesday, right? So it's just very difficult to have that. And so I thought, well, look, I'll try this generative language model. I'll try AI. And I found it just fabulous. Because it has access to a lot of information and can be expressive in a human-like way. It's a great chat partner for complex technical topics. And I was chatting to it about neuroscience and psychology and mental health issues. So interestingly for me, it had the capability and the depth to be a really powerful chat partner. And for me, I need that. So the core use here is in going backwards and forwards with somebody else conversationally, helps me to form my own ideas and helps me generate my understanding. And if I don't have that back and forth between somebody else, I find that very hard. It's a bit like, Wanda was saying, the blank piece of paper. I need the talk and I need need someone to come back at me to then respond off that. And it was great for that. So used it just all the time in my studying process, just sitting side by side as I was reading and studying stuff. I would just go to chat and ask a question, chat about something for a little bit and then move back. Things to watch out for and things that developed. So it is generative. And so one time I asked it to find me some studies that kind of confirmed the chat we've just been having. And it sent me some studies, but it's generative. So it made them up, it generated them. So it sent me some content back, which looked like genuine academic articles. I went to find them and they didn't exist. I was pretty shocked. And my first reaction was, oh my God, it's just made that up. It's lying, like a very kind of anthropomorphic reaction to it. And then, like, with a bit of reflection, I thought, well, no, it's just doing what it's supposed to do. It's just generating an answer from the information it's got. So I've learned to refine that by using the add-ins. So this is the key point here. There are some incredible add-ins for ChatGPT, and I started using some of them, but the one here is research library add-ins. And you have them switched on, and then you can use your prompts to say, without giving me articles, answer this question. What do you think about so and so and so and so? So that would be a good prompt to say, ignore the add-in while it's still on. If you don't do that, it will always go to the add-in and just draw from that. So if I have the add-in on, I would say, okay, show me some really good recent articles about that. And it would bring me correct articles, which are real. So it's now drawing from the article library rather than just making stuff up. So just something to watch out for. It is generative. So when you're back and forth, it might generate something that sounds good, but isn't real. So you've got to bear that in mind. But my view is that so would a fellow student, and it's on me to really think about that. I guess just taking it back into kind of work domain, you guys out there will know about Daniel Kahneman's work, Thinking Fast and Slow. So this is about heuristics as opposed to kind of more detailed reflection, making sure that you don't have bias in your thinking around a topic, taking your time on it. And I think one thing just to add at the end is I found that ChatGPT in particular was very helpful on speeding up thinking slow. So I kind of like that idea. So heuristics is like shortcut thinking, it's like gut feel, intuition, that kind of idea. When I want to avoid that, and so what I might use is ChatGPT to ask it whether I'm exhibiting bias in a particular thought, or ask it to reframe a thought, or ask it to think about something that I'm thinking about in the opposite way. So I'm challenging it to help me do my slow thinking, which is the careful, non-biased thinking, and try and speed that up. So this is quite a cool idea that you can take thinking fast and slow, avoid the thinking fast, but making the thinking slow faster, if that makes any sense to anyone. That's kind of what I've been doing.
Really interesting, Nick. Again, a different angle from how we've been using it. But I think probably something a lot of people can relate to. It brings us on for our last few minutes of our webinar to the philosophical angle that we defaulted back to a number of times when we were talking through the specifics of using AI. Wanda, do you want to talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure, Matt. I think, it does raise questions for us, and it does raise emotion for us. Nick touched on this, and I'm going to struggle to say this word because I struggle every single time, anthropomorphizing, which is really where we assign emotion to something that isn't human, and we assign human emotion to that thing. So it may bring frustration and anger and all of those kinds of disillusionment up for us in the moment. But it may also bring, we may feel resistance to it. We may feel awkward, we may feel clumsy, we may feel self-doubt. So really, the question is really around noticing, right? What is coming up for me? What questions is it raising from a zoom out perspective? What questions is it raising from a zoom in perspective for me? And just like in your exploration, Matt, thinking about, well, let me reflect on that a little bit, right? Let me think about, why is it that I'm feeling this way, right? Or what could it be, that makes me feel this way? In my own reflections, what's come up for me is that it's just like any other change. It feels uncomfortable. There is this awkwardness and this clumsiness around it. And for me, sometimes a little sense of disorientation, which is this kind of quality of not being able to see the wood for the trees, right? And all of that is absolutely normal because it's new to us. So this idea of, what questions is it raising for us individually? What questions is it raising for us collectively? And then also, what could these emotions that are coming up for me give me insight into? And how can I reflect on why that's coming up for me, just like Matt did? There's also this discussion that we reflected back on, which is really around is it lying or cheating, or does it just feel like lying or cheating to us? And perhaps that's got something to do with our next slide, which is really around tipping points. And I thought this was just a very wonderful representation of how tipping points actually happen. And Nick gave a beautiful, beautiful example where he talked all the way back to kind of the steam engine and what an amazing kind of innovation that was. And as we hold this picture and just have a look at it and talk about old paradigms and think about old paradigms and new paradigms, maybe Nick, you want to just wax lyrical on and give us a little bit of reflection on what we had talked about. You're on mute.
My new unmute methodology didn't work for a moment there. So, thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, thanks. I just remember someone saying about the technology of our age being different depending on what generation you are. So when we're in our midlife, the technology of our age is what's being invented right now and what we use in our trade and what we use in business and at school, and it's exciting and dynamic and new. And if we are, the older generation, it's disturbing and worrying and frightening and transformative, and it's going to change the world in a really uncomfortable way, and if we're babies, it's just what happened and, just what was around in the world as we grew up. So each generation has a completely different take from kind of an emotional point of view on the technology of their day. And I love the idea of the steam train. So as the steam train turned up, you have to remember it was revolutionary. And some people were saying, what on earth are you doing getting on that dangerous thing? You might suffocate. Just get in the horse and cart. But for those babies that were brought up in the steam age, steam train is just a steam train. It's just what they always saw. And it was nothing new, right? So that's just a lovely idea of how different ages and generations and times respond differently to the same thing.
Yeah,
thanks.
A great thought, Nick. I know we're drawing up on time. It's 1:15 now. I think we've just got one more slide. Nick, you had a few thoughts on some practical things to consider for people's businesses to tie it up.
Yeah, as it is new and novel, I think we have to be careful here. So it's worth thinking about how people might get started if they want to. I think it's worth kind of just considering the fact that the innovation curve that you've been shown suggests that half the audience will already have started and half won't. That being the case, if you're a leader, then you kind of need to know that's already happening and therefore get out there with it. So I think for leaders, it's this uncomfortable truth that there's no way back. You have to just adopt it and try and get in there. Culturally, I think it's really important to take into account that it is going to be shifting how people work really quickly. And therefore there can be HR issues, can be work profile issues. Some people will need to stop doing certain things and start doing other things. And so there's a big shift in work patterns here. You have to take that into account because there's negotiation to do about that, and there might be conflict and the need for mediation resolution. Just adopting it. So those first three kind of points, it's going to get started. So just think about how you want to initiate that for those people who haven't, the cultural point about both how we shift our work patterns and also what conflict might come up. And then my kind of key point here is like, just go transparent. I would say go transparent, because that's the only way you're going to find out what's really going on. Which takes me into the last point, really, the next two, which is about policies and procedures. I think as a work environment, you have a kind of really important work context. It's a place with rules. And so just having a free-for-all, which if you don't go transparent, you're going to have Wild West, that's really inappropriate. You have to start to try and work out what your policies and procedures are going to be, and how it's okay or not okay to use this, and start getting into that. And very importantly, there's going to be regulation coming down the track. So the European Union has already kind of started a big regulation piece on this, getting ahead of the whole world. One piece of which is that there will have to be notification of every single piece of AI you're using in your systems. And there might be 34 already running, right? So your team might not even know how they're using AI right now. And there could be fines. There's going to be big fines, theoretically, coming down the track, like GDPR. For this. So you need to get ahead of the game on this kind of stuff right now. So think about it like a change. Maybe you need a steering group, maybe you need some change agents, maybe you need some user cases, maybe you need to start thinking about how you're going to pilot. Just some initial thoughts for how, as a leader, to start getting your head around, why and how and in which domains you need to start thinking.
Brilliant. I think that's a really great way to wrap us up. And I would definitely echo that. My thoughts are, it's important to know what your options are and to have a think about this, whether you choose to use it or not. And if time is your big barrier, perhaps think about somebody in your business that you might be able to put onto doing a bit of research. I think knowing is important, even if you choose not to use it. Okay, fantastic. What a great discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed both researching that and talking it through it with everybody. And I can see the chat's been pinging away. So we're going to close up the session in a second after just a quick wrap-up slide. When we finish up presenting, I'm going to stop recording and we can open up for some questions. So we'll try and put microphones live for everybody. So anybody that wants to come on and ask some questions is very welcome to do so. Just flick to our wrap-up slide, please. Excellent. So our next Strategy Cafe is going to be on the 26th of October. We're going to be continuing this conversation on AI, but we're going to be focusing in a little bit more on discussing potential downsides, the risks and regulations. And the wonderful Minted Dial will be coming back to join us, a returning face on Strategy Cafe. I'm sure this is probably a topic everybody's seen in the news. I know as I've been preparing for this, I've seen maybe 10 articles in the tech news talking about AI, and a big chunk of that is around regulation. And finally, I want to just point you towards a simple 2-page document that we've been putting together. I think Alice is kindly working on, and we're going to try and send that around following this Strategy Cafe. And it's something which will hopefully give people a few ideas and indications of how they can start using AI in their business. So we'll send that around. I'd be really interested in any feedback from that as well.